Ladies and gentlemen, crimes against humanity, the acts and atrocities committed in war, where thousands or tens of thousands or millions are murdered and killed for no other reason but their ethnic or religious identity, are something that we cannot tolerate in modern society. It is the one thing that we eradicate, the one thing for which executions are considered okay in international court. In the Nuremberg trials, Nazi war criminals were actually executed for their acts. We say that war crimes are something far more dangerous than individual people who are committing such acts, because murderers are individuals who do not claim to have any legitimacy in their acts, whereas war criminals have the unique characteristic that they seem to think that their act is legitimate. They seem to expect other people to support their act and to join up and take pride in their actions because they did it for their own ethnicity, for their own group, for the group's global group. And that is why we say that they are extremely dangerous. Under our model, we are going to arrest every historian who happens to say that Stalin was okay, maybe Stalin was convicted. Every historian says that Hitler was okay, that that somehow, although the guy was convicted in criminal court of massacring millions, he had some good policies, there were some good things about him, and in general he helped the German people or stuff like that. What we say on the side of government is simply that anyone who makes claims that a certain war criminal, someone who has been convicted by a criminal court, anyone who makes claims that it was recruited in some way and he had some good merits to him will be tried, prosecuted, jailed, and so forth. We will shut down sites that say such claims, we will shut down, we will arrest historians who make such claims, and so on and so forth. We will hunt them down wherever we can. Yes, I'll take you.
Sir, Hitler and Stalin were never convicted. And my second question is, Truman, would you also prosecute every historian who says the bombing of Japan was a legitimate act of war?
You have now two questions. Okay, first, we think it's a shame that Hitler was not convicted, but okay, for every other future war criminal that will be convicted, it's fine. We say that they didn't face prosecution, and yes, under our model, someone who justifies the bombing is okay. We're not going to arrest them. They are not face criminal court. Okay, so freedom of expressions. Our first point in our government is first, why freedom of expression is a means and not an end. Second, we will outline the dangers of glorifying war criminals. Lastly, we'll talk about the efficacy, why our model is actually effective in preventing future war crimes and deaths. First and foremost, we on the side of government say that freedom of expression is not something that's absolute, it's not an absolute right, but rather a means to live a good life. We allow you to have freedom of expression so that you can develop culturally, we provide freedom of expression so you can build your life in the ways you fit, so you can be happy. But if free speech kills other people, at that point we stop you from doing it. For example, you're not allowed to shout fire in a hallway where there's no fire, because people might stampede and trample each other to death. We do not allow people to incite others to kill. If I stand in this room and tell you that you should go and massacre everyone for a certain ethnicity, I should go to prison. I will go to prison in most liberal democracies, and we support that stance because we say that the right of a certain person's right to talk is inferior to another person's right to live. So that is our theoretical basis for our limitations on freedom of speech. So this actually brings about the question of how. How is it that glorifying war criminals endanger other people's rights? So we say the following things. First, groups who identify with convicted war criminals feel a certain sense of national humiliation, right? They are tempted to shake away the past, the guilt that they feel. They are already in a position where they want to feel exonerated, they want to feel like they were okay, because it's very hard to deal with the fact that your father or grandfather was the murderer and did something that's completely evil. So what we say say that war criminals appeal to national pride because they remind us of the time when we were strong and didn't have to answer to anyone. When I look back, when I hark back to the good old days when we Japan massacred the Philippines, I feel strong. I no longer feel humiliated. I no longer feel like I'm a country that has been pacified with a nuclear bomb. I remember the good times. And we say that there's a huge danger in that. We say it relives, it revitalizes old conflicts and old hates. We say it appeals to the darker sides of humanity. And we say this affects both sides. It revitalizes the hate and the sense of national pride on the Japanese part, but it also revitalizes the hate on the Philippines part, who actually were extremely angered by Japanese textbooks, actually denying the atrocities committed by Japan against the Philippines and justifying the occupations okay because like the Philippines needed to be occupied by Japan. We say there's a clear harm in that, and the opposition needs to deal with that. So because it feels anger on both sides, it actually increases the chance of conflict arising yet again, and deaths will occur as a result. Now, let's move on to the last point of efficacy. How exactly our model will work? Because the other side is trying to stand up here and say, well, come on, the extremists can still say whatever they want. Yes, they can, but they cannot publicly raise funds, can they? When they invest funds in launching the website and it's shut down, they lost that investment, right? But moreover, with regard to the moderates, we say that extremists cannot appeal to the moderate sides of society. You need someone respectable. A skinhead that says that Hitler was good will not appeal to anyone in this room, but a respectable historian standing with a suit and saying that, yes, according to my academic research, Hitler was okay. According to my academic research, the Japanese war criminals who decided to invade Philippines actually did them a favor because they needed a strong ruler. They might appeal to the moderates in society. We say that because of the national union, there's a huge danger in the softer sides of extremism, and those sides we can deal with. You can't arrest the tiny historians, you cannot arrest every last skinhead. So we say that we on our side of the opposition are being very effective in minimizing the legitimacy or the perceived legitimacy of these war criminals and their appeal to the moderate sides of society. For all those reasons, we are very proud to stand with proposition.
Thank the Speaker for his comments, and that's the opening opposition from IIU, and then to open for the opposition.
Testing? Can everyone hear me? Mr. Speaker, in opposition side, we don't believe it's our responsibility to tell you that it's a good thing if individuals glorify war criminals. We think we don't like it either, but we think, Mr. Speaker, that expression is fundamental to society. Firstly, an expression in this form is extremely beneficial to society, Mr. Speaker. It provides value to society, and we think what proposition brought into this debate will make things worse, especially if you analyze societies in post-conflict or post-war eras, Mr. Speaker. We think it's important for objective truth to be brought out to society, Mr. Speaker, and if those aren't truths that they're talking about, it's time and it's room, Mr. Speaker, where we can allow for discourse and counter-discourse, Mr. Speaker. We've never really heard of a grave problem coming from opposition side, because if we think these individuals are bad individuals, yes, we are willing to condemn them. If they have committed crimes against humanity, we are willing to condemn them. And given that these are convicted war criminals, we have already condemned them, Mr. Speaker. We don't think there is a problem against Mr. Speaker genuinely saying that war criminals are bad. But we think, Mr. Speaker, what their model does, especially given the context of how we set it up, yes, Stalin and Hitler were even convicted criminals, but let's assume that they successfully established a case and actually talked about war criminals, Mr. Speaker. What they're denying individuals from doing is actually telling the truth. Because we think, yes, these individuals might be war criminals, but they might have been individuals who actually had good social or economic policies Speaker, check and balance against the voice of the society, not automatically suppressing them, Mr. Speaker, and automatically placing a judgment on whether these views are right or wrong. He says this, right? Expression is a means and not an end. Yeah, that's why we allow that means to happen, so we can have an end, Mr. Speaker. We think we place high value in the freedom of expression. Only in extreme cases do we disallow it. Yeah, like saying fire in the hall is extreme because people can rush for that small door over there and people can die from getting jammed together. But we don't see this in the case of people glorifying or talking about positive things and positive policies of war criminals, Mr. Speaker. He says this, the dangers are two. Firstly, these individuals are individuals who face fierce national pride and they want to shake away the shame. That's why they say good things, Mr. Speaker. They think this will revitalize all conflicts. First, this is highly unlikely. If these individuals have faced trials, Mr. Speaker, in which the entire international community, or at least the community within those areas, have come up and gone through a due process and said, this individual did bad things, the society condemns these bad things, Mr. Speaker, we don't think this small voice of people who want to say, oh, I'm proud of my grandfather, will actually overwhelm this, Mr. Speaker. We think these people are already condemned. But secondly, Mr. Speaker, if these voices exist, there is a strong need to respond to them, Mr. Speaker. And if we know these voices exist, we think this is what steps up public condemnation of these individuals. This is what, Mr. Speaker, what is actually happening within society. Especially when you talk about academic research, right? He's worried that academic historians and people like that will validate the actions of these societies. Well, no, we don't think so. We think individuals can differentiate what people talk about within academia, Mr. Speaker, and also the bad things that these individuals have done. Because we think, Mr. Speaker, especially in the realm of academia, we think these are individuals who assess the actions of these individuals to create the totality of the picture, Mr. Speaker, and we think it's important, especially, to realize within academia that it's a value, Mr. Speaker, to acknowledge if these individuals have done positive things, we think they have done positive things. It is the truth. It still, Mr. Speaker, is something completely detached to whether or not he has done war crimes or killed individuals, something individuals won't easily forget.
The problem with that is that you assume that people actually have the ability and the knowledge in order to make that judgment.
Why don't people have the ability to make that knowledge? You need to prove that individuals within post-war, post-conflict societies are just unbelievably stupid. Often is when, firstly, like you talk about, right, the depiction of history, the portrayal of personalities, and the contributions that individuals have done. We think that freedom of expression within these instances is very important, Mr. Speaker, because it allows for objective truth, and it allows for individuals to assess an individual's action in its totality. We have to acknowledge, Mr. Speaker, that there are two sides to every story, and there exist people who are on the other side as well. We think the views of these individuals, Mr. Speaker, cannot be curtailed on firstly, because it's a legitimate point of view. If he said this person has done certain things, he probably has done so, Mr. Speaker. It's the truth. But secondly, Mr. Speaker, we think automatic suppression of these views is doing the exact same things these war criminals were doing onto the society during the time of their reign, Mr. Speaker. They're thinking of what people should say. They're telling, Mr. Speaker, what people should or should not think. We think individuals should be left to their own free will to decide from the information that exists within this, Mr. Speaker. We think it's extremely important. There's a high value to it in post-conflict society, Mr. Speaker, because we don't think these trials are enough to return justice to society. Society needs to be able to evaluate, Mr. Speaker, and think for themselves that this is something that we want to condemn as well. That can only happen in a realm where you allow individuals to express their views. Why is it important, Mr. Speaker? Because if these views exist within society, they are going to exist anyway. What we do, Mr. Speaker, if there exists a situation where you revitalize all conflicts and people getting angry and things like that, what you allow individuals or what you allow the situation to do is provide for stronger counter discourse within society. This is something trials do not do. Trials, Mr. Speaker, judge individuals based on their actions. But society, Mr. Speaker, needs to feel and needs to hear things, Mr. Speaker, that affirms their beliefs that these individuals should be condemned. And that's only in a realm where you avoid or you
us that there's no actual problem with the status quo, and that people are smart enough to differentiate between their judgment on one's economic policy and what he may or may not have done to massive populations of a different ethnicity. I will show you in my speech why that is not true, and I will be giving you the analysis of the populations and countries in a post-conflict situation which they have completely ignored. Then I will go on to show you why this meets the criterion, why our proposition meets the criterion for when we infringe on freedom of speech, because they have agreed with us that when there's clear and present danger to human life, we do limit freedom of speech. And I will show you why our situation today is completely analogous to the situation of incitement, which is banned in all democracies. First of all, a few words of rebuttal. She told us that these views will be there anyway, even if we ban them. Yes, maybe. We say that when 10 people in our society hold these views, that's not a problem. But if those 10 people are able to glorify these leaders and recruit masses and thousands and tens of thousands of people to believe in those views, that's where it becomes a problem, and that's why we don't want to do it. They told us it's the same thing those former leaders have done in the past. No, it meets the criteria under which we now ban or infringe of freedom of speech, as I will explain in my speech. And the rest of the things she told us, that people are smart enough to pass judgment and to make the differentiation, and there's no actual problem. I'll be dealing with that in just a second. Let's be very clear about our model. Obviously, we will not ban to glorify someone who hadn't been convicted. That's in the motion. Future leaders will be convicted, will be banned, or past leaders who have been convicted. So what have they ignored on side opposition today? They told us there's no actual problem, but that ignores the scenario which is relevant to our debate today. Because states and nations whose former leaders have been tried and convicted of war crimes, who are these states and nations? These are nations in a post-war situation. Maybe the war was a civil war. Maybe the war was a war with another country. But we say if the country's leader had been tried and convicted for war crimes, it is extremely likely that that country is now in quite a bad state. We say maybe they lost the war and they're poor. Maybe they're desperate. Maybe, as my partner said, in 100% likelihood, they feel humiliated. The side opposition today has completely underestimated and underrepresented the value and the strength of national pride and national humiliation. We say the only reason Hitler was able to take power in Germany after World War I was the humiliation of the German people was the humiliation of the German people after World War I, because they were so humiliated by the French, they were so oppressed by the Allies in that war, that they yearned to be back to their glory days, to their days of power. They wanted to elect a strong leader who will march them forward and not to succumb to the humiliation that they had suffered. We say that in societies in which civil war took place, these people have now have to get along with each other, with the same people they now come to daily contact with. We say if one sector of society has massacred another sector of society, and now these two sectors have to live together, it's extremely dangerous to allow people of the same sector to continue glorifying these leaders, because that constitutes incitement. Why? I'll show you right now. Because we say some messages are before that. Go, man.
If these individuals existed in society, they're so shamed, wouldn't suppressing them further radicalize their movements and legitimize their cause?
Why do you think they're shamed? No, they're shamed because they have been humiliated. They want to go back to their glory days. That's why they want to glorify these leaders. We don't think they're shamed. We think these individuals who want to glorify are not shamed, that they don't want others to be shamed. Guys, why does this constitute incitement? Because we see some messages are literal and only interpreted literally. When I say Obama is stupid, then it just means that Obama is stupid. When I say Obama should be removed from the White House, it just means that. But some messages carry a stronger message even beyond words. We say when I wear a t-shirt with a swastika, I say something very, very clear. I'm not saying I like the shape of the object. I'm saying that killing Jews was a correct policy. I'm saying that Jews in society and Jew people in camp was the right way to go. We don't think there's any other meaning for swastika. We think when I wear a white cape, I'm conveying a very accurate message. Obviously, with a dummy shaped hat, I'm conveying a very strong message about what we have to do with blacks. We say, big mind that when you wear a swastika t-shirt, Jews, let's grab blacks and hang them from a tree. It's the same thing. That object, that shape, has the same meaning as saying those words. Now, how does convicted war leaders come into the picture? Because we say some people, because of the deep emotional effect of their deeds, because of their reputation, because of the immediate association their name creates in the mind of every reasonable person on the face of the earth, has the exact same meaning. We say when every person on the face of the earth hears the word Hitler, they do not think economic policies, they do not think vegetarianism, oh, he's going to art school, that's a good idea. Oh, we do not think that. We say there's no ability to differentiate, there's no ability to have a discussion about Hitler's economic policies without addressing his other somewhat controversial policies. Now, let's assume it can happen in the minds of reasonable people sitting in the academia debating in this wonderful result in Koch. You know where it cannot happen? It cannot happen in the minds of people of post-war nations who suffered humiliation, who suffered poverty, who suffered defeat, who suffered the chasm of civil war. We say those people are so emotionally influenced by what had happened that they are completely unable to make that academic differentiation. They are not in a position to sit in an air-conditioned room and say, oh yes, I completely can discuss only Hitler's literary views. We say those people for whom this is deeply engraved within their life, we say for whom it carries immense emotional weight, they are unable to do this differentiation. And we say that's why when you say Hitler was a great guy, for those people you say Hitler's policies were great. And when you say Hitler's policies were great, you actively say maybe we should do it again. And we think that constitutes a huge problem, especially to those people who are inclined because of their circumstances to maybe try and do it again because their status right now is not as good as it used to be. Is there a problem? Absolutely. Is it justified under certain criteria? Absolutely. We beg to propose.
Thank the speaker for his comments, and invite the second speaker from IIUM to respond to the opposition.
Yes. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad. I've never seen Yoni that fantastically angry. Never. Just give up a few things in my speech. Firstly, we'll look at number one, whether glorification of a leader equals giving legitimacy to his action, which also then means individuals in all likeliness will want to follow the footsteps of Hitler. It's odd. Secondly, we'll look at the speaker is how does, we'll answer the question of whether you should really maintain stability through the suppression of opinions. And that's exactly what opening Gamma was doing. Then we'll look into how under our world, sort of the speaker, allowing positive portrayals of individuals who were convicted of war crimes is in fact in the best interest of post-conflict societies, especially post-conflict societies who are emotional, which then rapidly clashes with Yoni. So speaker, let's get the first question, right? Does glorification of a leader equals the glorification of the act, and therefore also means individuals will follow suit? We're telling the speaker that rhetorically this is a very intuitive and interesting argument to pursue, but we're telling the speaker that that is not the standard we hold upon individuals who at the end of the day read the books which they buy off the shelves. Because we're telling the speaker that if we were to take such a preemptive attitude towards the things which we fear people will end up doing, then most of the time in all likeliness we'll end up banning most of the things which exist out there. But we're telling the speaker a responsible government is one which places trust upon their citizens, is one which can acknowledge that these individuals who make up their citizenry can make a rational calculation and make a rational decision over which opinion to follow and which not to follow, Mr. Speaker. But furthermore, we tell you that a government which is too preemptive in its approach, especially if it deems its its citizenry too immature is one which is very paternalistic. We tell you, Mr. Speaker, that it's not as if we weren't ready to acknowledge that there might be a harm. We tell you, Mr. Speaker, that in all activists, probably 1 out of 1,000 readers will probably think that Hitler was a swell guy somehow. But we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that if you weigh that possibility over the possibility of counter-discourse, the possibility of being able to find an objective truth, or at least move closer towards objective truth, Mr. Speaker, we tell you that we are willing to tolerate a few gullible readers here and there. And that's always been the attitude with most things which we allow to be publicized out there anyway, especially in the academic field. And we know that the academic field can sometimes be a little crazy, but we tell you we allow it to happen anyway because craziness leads to discussion, leads to a better understanding of the things, of situations which these people are discussing about. And in their model, Mr. Speaker, we don't get this. And in their model, we have a biased, victorious side saying that we were right, doing the same thing which these regimes were doing previously, and justifying that position in the name of stability, similar to how the people they were condemning also justified their position. Which then moves nicely into answering the question of, do you really ensure stability through suppression? We tell you, Mr. Speaker, that number one, that is not the standard of which we place ourselves at. We tell you that you never really ensure stability through suppression. Why? Because we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that suppression of information makes people more radical. We tell you that discourse allows individuals to understand that there's an outlet for them, a viable outlet to join the discussion, Mr. Speaker, which then reduces their likeliness in looking for alternatives which probably are violent or alternatives which are not necessarily in line with whatever kind of standards we hold ourselves to. But furthermore, Mr. Speaker, we tell you that it's not fair for us to maintain stability in such a way. Because we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that individuals or groups of society who have a legitimate opinion or think that they have a legitimate truth to forward actually have a legitimate say and have a legitimate truth to forward in status quo. We tell you that we don't entirely clamp down on the Marxist society in IIU. We don't clamp down on individuals who read the Das Kapital in status quo, probably because these people were somehow radicalized and turned into Marxists or somehow, Mr. Speaker. We tell you that that is not the attitude. We allow them to read those things, we allow them to assess individually, and we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that is the best way to move forward in terms of discourse. I'll take on the opening.
We don't need an objective discussion about whether or not a war criminal was a monster. He is objectively found in court to be a monster of the worst sort. No need for discussion about that.
A war criminal might have ordered the systematic extermination of a race, but it doesn't mean that he didn't build a dam. It doesn't mean he didn't build roads for his people. It doesn't mean that he didn't emancipate certain minorities within the countries. All these things did happen despite being a war criminal. And these are the kind of truth that we'll never be able to find out under their model. These are things which will, be happy to live without. How allowing positive portrayals is in fact in the best interest of post-conflict societies, especially emotional ones. Let's look at post-conflict societies. I think this was glazed over by the opening government. We tell you, Mr. Speaker, that post-conflict societies are in fact societies which have been ripped apart by their history and have been polarized into different segments of society. And in fact, because of this, Mr. Speaker, we acknowledge that there's a huge information vacuum between these different groups of minority, mostly because they've been ripped apart in such a way systematically by a regime which was previously dead. So what do they need? And how do you move forward in a post-conflict society? The way you move forward, Mr. Speaker, is through reconciliation. And we acknowledge that reconciliation becomes extremely important for those actions. Thank you. And let's ask ourselves, what is reconciliation? We tell you, Mr. Speaker, that reconciliation is the ability for societies to move closer to a middle line, a truth which all of them can agree upon. This becomes especially important if you acknowledge that these communities are emotional. The more emotional these communities are, the more important it becomes for us to look for an objective truth. But how do you find objective truth, Mr. Speaker? At least something relative to the truth. We tell you, Mr. Speaker, you allow and mobilize individuals who can ascertain what really happened and fill the information vacuum which existed post-conflict for these societies. And in their models, Mr. Speaker, individuals who can and have the ability to look at the flip side of the coin will not get the ability to do so. And this is where, Mr. Speaker, we tell you, you deprive the right to know of these communities from being able to access different points of view of the conflict and then therefore make a decision decision as to how they should reconcile and move forward from that point onwards, Mr. Speaker. We tell you radicalization, which Khalida talked about in the last part of the speech, becomes interestingly important today's, mostly because if you deprive access to the objective truth, if you don't allow individuals to have a say in that discourse, this is where you have that, this is where you push them into more radical means, which then means more trouble for these post-conflict societies. So what have we heard in this case? We've told you, Mr. Speaker, that it's not okay for you to not tell the truth. We tell you, Mr. Speaker, if anything, we have to pride ourselves in our ability to be honest with things. Thank you very much.
Thank the Speaker for his comments and invite the European member for Haifa to continue the next conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, this debate is very simple. First proposition got up and basically told you that this kind of speech creates an environment in which further crimes can be committed in the future. They said that these kind of people, there's no reason why these kind of people should be portrayed in a positive light. First opposition then gets up and says, oh, but there's a better way to achieve this. There's a better way, for people in society to adopt positive views on minorities or, oppressed people of the past and negative views on these dictators of the past. How do we do that? By the free market mechanism of free speech. We disagree. So what we're going to do in our, basically what I'm going to do in my extension is a few things. First of all, I'm going to talk about why there's severe psychological harm in the very act of this speech by itself. Even if we don't get to the scenario where it creates, violence and all that kind of stuff in the future, we think that the speech act in itself is enough to that. Second of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about why this will actually de facto achieve the goal of diminishing the moral value of these, past dictators and oppressors, why we think that that's massively important. But first, let's take a look at some rebuttal. Some of it will be in my speech, but I'll give some right now. First of all, on the whole issue of free speech, as Heineke pointed out in her POI, didn't quite get an adequate answer beyond, people are not stupid. Well, I'm going to show you why, actually, even though people might not be stupid, their whole case rests on an assumption that's just not true. First of all, their case rests on an assumption that people have this, inherent need to investigate truth all the way through. We don't think this is true. We think that there are a lot of naive people in society that, will only hear half the story and say, oh, okay, that's enough. Hitler had good economic policies. Pinochet was good for the economy or whatever, and go home and be content about it. And so we don't think that you showed that people will have an interest in investigating it all the way through. And we think that once they do, they might learn the truth. And furthermore, you never told us why they actually want to investigate the truth all the way. We said that most people don't even care about this kind of stuff. All they do is, they hear one thing from here, one thing from there, kind of put one and one together, and that's the way their views on life are formed. So that fails too. But thirdly, we'd say that for people to be able to weigh out the pros and cons of the moral character of these past dictators, rapists, murderers, we think that most people need to have some sort of educational background in order to understand the historical context in which this thing happened. And like we point to the case of neo-Nazis in the United States, they don't really walk around with degrees from universities that they're able to understand this kind of stuff. So we just don't think that the whole free market mechanism of free speech is good enough to be able to prevent a harmful environment which causes, as I'll show you in a few minutes, severe psychological harm. And on the issue of objective truth, they said, oh, but academia, we just want to know what really happened. Well, I don't think the opposition quite got what we're trying to say here. What we're doing on this issue is we're taking a consequentialist approach to the truth, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that every single truth in and of itself is worth hearing, especially when that truth invades the public sphere and can create severe psychological harm for other people. Therefore, we do think that some truths should be, nipped at the bud. And thirdly, they say, the whole idea of reconciliation in past, conflict societies. We think that reconciliation is in the interest of all post-conflict society and all the parties in those societies, and we think that these people will be happy to just not give their vocal support for these people for the sake of being able to reconcile their differences, we don't see a problem with this. And furthermore, like we'd say that this proposition does not, the majority of it does not refer to these societies anyway, but the liberal West or whatever. Yeah, okay. So let's get on to my points of why there's psychological harm, ladies and gentlemen. Here we say something very simple. We say that war criminals symbolize something beyond the crimes they commit. We say that when they're glorifying speech, about these people, saying that some of their policies in the past were good or positive in somehow, we say that it tilts the balance of the moral character as perceived by other people, right? It says, oh, Pinochet was very, very bad, but the more I learned about all the good things he does, it kind of paints this picture that Pinochet might not have been as bad as I had expected. And we say that this is especially true when the crimes committed by those people don't refer to me or my people or something that my people have gone through. Now, why is that bad? Very simple. Because we say that war criminals, ladies and gentlemen, symbolize the wrongness of the act itself. So if we're glorifying somebody who's convicted of rape, of mass rape of a population, we think that this is extremely offensive to all women who are raped. We'd say that if it symbolizes, I don't know, the murder of minorities, of a certain minority, this is extremely offensive to all people from that minority. Because we don't think that just because the crimes were committed against a certain number of people, then that's where the harms end. We think that it symbolizes something far beyond that, and we think that this causes severe psychological harm. Why is this so? Very simply, because we'd say that it causes these people to relive their trauma. It causes them to remember that who they are, that what defines them, is extremely offensive against their identity. And we think that this is something that in our society should not stand. I'll take you.
So, sir, don't you think that people can find an alternative symbol for the underlying cause in order to advocate that in the
Well, if they do and it causes the same kind of psychological harms, we'll ban that too. We have no problem. We're trying to protect society, not incentivize people to look for alternative ways to cause harm. But on my second point, of why this de facto achieves the goal of diminishing the moral value of these war criminals. First and foremost, we'd say that when we accept this kind of proposition, we attach a price to the speech act of glorifying someone. Because now what we say is that these people who want to, give voice to all the good things that these dictators in the past did, it forces these kind of people to be willing to pay a price to say that. And so we'd say that not only are we likely to see less and less of these expressions being made in the public sphere, which we think belongs to everybody and there should be protected for everybody, but we also think that it'll make people, reevaluate their own opinions. Because if I know that there's a severe price to be paid for just, glorifying some kind of war criminal, I'm going to check, the history books very, very well to make sure that what I'm saying reflects my opinion on the matter. And we think that this is extremely important because it makes people a lot more responsible, and therefore it makes them a lot less likely to make this kind of speech. But moreover, we think that when we do this, ladies and gentlemen, the government rubber stamps a historical narrative. And we think that this is extremely important because we were all socialized on history from textbooks and all that kind of stuff. And we accept most of those truths as dogmatic. We accept them as, universally true. And we think that under this proposition, we're basically rubber stamping this kind of truth in the same way. So basically, if some people had never had access to know why these people are so bad, now we think that they will have access to know why these people are so bad because it is rubber stamped by the state. We ensure that even if people do like Pinochet's economical policies, they will be very, very, very hesitant to give voice to them because of all the psychological harms associated with giving voice to this. We proudly do this.
So I thank the speaker for his comments and invite the first speaker from Leiden to continue against the opposition.
You in this room are not much smarter or dumber than people in a post-conflict society. They assume a basic human psychology that we all share, that they all share, namely that if we are confronted with a wrong and a right, we will conclude that it's right. That simply isn't as simple as that. People can ascertain, and then they say, well, people, if confronted by opinions, they just don't care. So if they don't care, how can this deep hatred then be incentivized? If they have no strong emotional feeling to even, look into the matter, how then can they, carelessly become deep-seated hated persons? It doesn't make sense, this in the psychological image that they are portraying. I need to go into some other stuff that they brought up, namely that by talking about these people in a one-sided way, these war criminals, that will actually diminish their moral value. It will make sure that we will not do the same again, or that history will not repeat itself, which in the case of war crimes, of course, something that we would applaud. But instead of creating a sort of moral character of these people, we're creating a moral caricature. In the sense that if you only allow people to talk about the psychology of this dictator in a very one-sided way, and about their actions in a one-sided way, that dehumanizes them, that demonizes them, that makes them different than everyone in this room, and also different from all the politicians that we're faced with that are human. That means that the lesson of history will not be learned because we will not see the danger coming, namely that every dictator could be I would like an explanation on your side for that. So how can we draw lessons from history when we are not faced with the true picture of history? And how are we not bound to repeat it if we are blind in one eye, namely to the fact that these were people, these were human beings that had human characteristics and were a mixed bag of qualities. And let's be honest, within that mixed bag there were some really bad qualities as well, and we would like them to also be out in public discourse. No, sit down. Now, we need to address some other stuff. Namely, we're going to put people on trial because we want to give less attention to the discussion about, war criminals. What will these trials be like? I think they will be pretty high profile if this is such a tense issue. I mean, will they be publicized? Will there be secret courts or some sort of black operations way to take these people out? I mean, in some way you will be generating publicity, and there will have to be a trial where these things are discussed. And are we as the public allowed to check that? I'm not really sure. So if you really want to diminish attention for these characters, then trials might not be the best way. Now we also need to address the false analogy of the swastika in the first half of the proposition. First of all, most of us from Europe, we live in a post-war society where 60 years have passed. We live in a continent where there's consensus about the Holocaust that it was a bad thing, there's consensus about the Nazi Party that it was a bad thing, where there's consensus about World War II that it's very horrible. Now, the point is that in a post-conflict society, we haven't had time, there is not yet the time where everyone is agreed about that. So what they say is that simply everyone will agree that this is offensive and therefore should be prosecuted. Where we say, look, a symbol is always a symbol is something different from a personality. Namely, a symbol doesn't have a prior life, doesn't have actions. It's only there as a pure symbol, whereas a person is not just a pure symbol. So, and they will prosecute it even if there is no intent and no harm to actually hurt other people, because they talked about victims, right? So, people from India, here, you could wear a swastika without the intent of, legitimizing the Holocaust. Why don't we prosecute that? Because there's no intent there. They will not test the intent of these historians to reflect history accurately. No, you talked about history, you said something that there were beautiful highways in Germany, you go to jail. Is that a reasonable assessment of history? Please explain.
He said something very simple. This is equal to active incitement because it creates an environment which encourages and induces violence and crime. Very simple.
Well, no. I mean, the point is that hate speech is already illegal if you directly use it. But we don't say that necessarily. You need to prove that every talk about a dictator in a nuanced way amounts to hate speech. You haven't fulfilled that. To move on to some more interesting constructors. Namely, what do post-war and post-dictatorial societies that had to deal with war crimes, war criminals actually look like? And they used World War I, which is very interesting. They said, look, in World War I, there was this problem, namely that people felt treated badly, the Germans felt treated badly because of the aftermath of World War I. And they never had a nuanced and fair assessment of their part in the war. They never had that. Now, if we follow their logic on proposition, then World War II would have started because the Kaiser had been, glorified in the meantime. That was not the case. The Kaiser was, of course, not convicted, but the point is that the symbol for that war was not the cause for the next war. The problem was that the people in the post-conflict area, namely Germany, after the First World War, never felt, that their case was treated equally, namely that they weren't the only ones responsible for a great slaughter, and so forth. And you are creating exactly the same situation in every post-conflict society. Why? Because there's always a winner and a loser in a conflict. And sometimes there are just two losers. Now, in this case, Ali already mentioned Truman, the president that decided to bomb Japan with nuclear weapons, to bomb civilians. Also, there must be quite a few Allied commanders who decided to bomb Dresden, right? They were never convicted because the winners will not convict their generals. That means that in a post-conflict society, who will be the war criminals? They will be the leaders of the losing party. And therefore, they will be further suppressed from actually getting a fair and nuanced view of history, because their leaders were bad, their leaders were demons, they were stupid enough to follow them, whereas the other guys who also had part in the conflict, well, they're just different. Why? Because they won. Is that really justice? Is that really working towards avoiding a new war? Is that really doing justice to the minority that has lost, that needs to not feel resentment, that needs to cooperate with the majority or with the other party that won? We haven't seen any of that. So what I told you is that people in post-war societies are not stupid. Their view of psychology is very twisted. The lessons from history will not be learned on side of proposition. And in post-war and post-dictatorial societies, this is a very dangerous idea because it empowers a government to suppress the losing party. We beg you to oppose.
Comments, and as the second speaker from 5 men to close the case for the opposition.
So, I'm going to summarize this debate. And I'm going to summarize it into two basic questions. First, I'll show you the harms of this speech, since, all kind of agree that if there are harms, we can ban this. And secondly, I will show you what will actually happen and how this proposal will be very beneficial for society. But before we get to that, let's do some rebuttal to what we previously heard. So, the speaker started with saying, we should humanize them, because then we realize they're human, and then we realize that every single one of them could, be in the circumstances and commit these crimes. Well, we know they're human. We don't think they're aliens that landed on this earth from somewhere. We know that they're humans that committed these crimes. That is fine. But they still represent for us something that is extremely, extremely vile. So we want them to be symbols of these extreme vile actions, and that's what they stand for. Humanizing them, showing that they also have good characteristics, only diminishes the idea of what they've done. It only shows, well, he killed a few people, but he also was really, really nice to himself. So apparently he's not such a bad person. No, thank you. Then he talked about this kind of thing, in a post-war conflict, they haven't quite agreed yet what is right and what is wrong. Well, personally, I think that the victims of genocide and mass rape have kind of agreed that what the other side did was wrong, and they're quite happy to stand in opposition of it. And then we went on to this idea, but sometimes there's simply no intent. Sometimes, I don't know, you just commit mass genocide, and it was not exactly what you meant to do. Well, first of all, we think this is highly speculative, because you have to just commit such a severe crime, there has to be some sort of intent there. But more than that, we don't always care about the intent that people use the symbol. No, thank you, not at this moment. The intent with which people use the symbol, as long as it still has psychological harms, as we pointed out to you in the second proposition. As long as people are harmed by the use of the symbol and thereby excluded from the public sphere, we think this is bad enough and this is reason enough to exclude these symbols from being used, ladies and gentlemen. And then there was this weird thing about, only the losers get convicted and therefore we shouldn't do this. This is a little bit odd, because the losers were still rapists and they were still committed genocide, and they still did really, really, really bad things. We actually are quite happy that they lost, ladies and gentlemen, and that we can now bring them to war tribunals and all of that. That doesn't mean we should now suddenly allow their image once again to be used as a symbol. There's simply a fallacy in logic there, I'm afraid. Go for it.
So, what will happen then to the disgruntled loser minority or loser groups that see that it's okay that their leaders are convicted and that their leaders can't be talked about. On the other side is still perfectly legitimate and still perfectly legitimately sanctified.
First of all, we think in general, though, in this entire subject, the result that you brought up of America, we don't think it's quite exactly the same. The intent wasn't there to kill a lot of people just because of the race and ethnic wasn't the war crime. We think that is quite significant. But what we're saying more than that, ladies and gentlemen, what we're saying more than that is that at least what we're doing is we're taking away from them the possibility to rally around this symbol, because that is what these leaders are. Indeed, they feel humiliated, and now we bring this leader that was one national pride to them, and now they can rally around. We take that away from them. We think that's an excellent thing. So let me get into my summation. Because let us talk a little bit about the harms. First proposition already started with this. They showed us how it's basically great for incitement, and they're humiliated, they look for a strong leader, and therefore this will rally them around them. But then the first opposition came and they said, no. But you have to understand that the dialogue here is extremely, extremely important. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't think there is any value in the dialogue here. For the very simple reason, as we've pointed out to you again and again, that most people don't actually have the strong desire to find out what is true. Especially not, if they've been humiliated, especially not if they have, the need to get some kind of strong nationalistic feeling. They're not going to try and investigate this. They will simply accept what they're being told. And that means that this idea simply only gets perpetuated, which we think is very bad. It once again creates this atmosphere of hatred. But more than that, and this is what we've told you, we have here an instance of psychological harms. Because basically, no, thank you, not right now. Basically, what it does, this leader symbolizes the acts. This leader symbolizes what he did. Hitler stands for killing 6 million Jews. You can't get any way around it. So now this symbol is being used once again, but in a more positive context. We think this is really, really bad because this basically really is the trauma of war the victims. They went through this once before. They felt that they had to feel this humiliation, and now they're once again confronted with the symbol that oppressed them, that murdered them, and they feel once again threatened. Go for it.
Everyone agrees that Hitler was an ass, and for every voice that he wasn't, there's 10,000 voices that say he still was. What's your problem there?
The problem is that, let's say, for instance, somebody who's Jewish and sees a neo-Nazi march, he feels suppressed by this opinion. He feels he once again has to relive the trauma of being a suppressed minority. We think this is really bad for the simple reason that they feel that, as we've told you, the sphere of expression is the public sphere. We want to other people the trauma, which makes them feel like they're threatened and suppressed. You prevent them from actually participating in them. And we think this is a very, very bad thing, ladies and gentlemen. They feel threatened. They feel like they cannot express them freely because they want to get. This is not just, somebody that insulted them once upon a time. This is somebody that really harmed them, that thinks that they are wrong simply because of the race that they are. This means that they feel they cannot truly freely participate in the dialogue. It means that they are actually excluded from the public sphere. We think this is very, very severe, very bad. So second of all, what will happen after this proposal? Well, first of all, we say, we take away the platform for them to actually spread their hatred, which is a great thing in itself. And they said, but Christians will only make them more radical. Well, personally, they already think that one ethnic group should be killed just because of they are. We think they're pretty radical already. We don't think they can get more radical than that. And then they talk about, it is best for society because this is how we can go towards reconciliation. How on earth does a symbol for genocide bring us closer to more reconciliation, ladies and gentlemen? It only emphasizes the hatred there was in between them. So there is no way to get into reconciliation here. And more than that, and this is what we've also brought in the second proposition, we're actually diminishing the values because we're attaching a price to expressing his opinion. We're saying, you want to express this, you have to pay a price. So you better make damn sure that this is really what you want to believe in. This is a huge disincentive for people to actually go out and do this, and therefore we believe that they will do it less, and then we will have a less of a platform for these extreme opinions, which we do not believe have any place in any kind of democracy. And for these reasons, we call upon you to propose.
Thank you, Stephen, for the comments. And as the second speaker, I'd like to close the case of opposition.
I think he missed it. How did that happen? I just fell one down. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
there seems to be a lot of confusion going on the other side of the house. Firstly, Yuri stood up and talked for an entire 7 minutes about Hitler and Stalin, and he also mentioned that he will not forbid historians to talk about Truman, who was responsible for some killing. Secondly, Yoni stood up and said, well, we are not going to prosecute people who talk good about not convicted people, being Hitler, Stalin, and Truman. We are only going to talk about people who talk about people who are convicted. Then the second side, the second proposition mentioned that we don't care about whether you are convicted or not, as long as the psychological, as long as if there is a certain psychological harm, then we are going to forbid you to speak in a certain way about certain people. This undermines the freedom of expression in a very bad sense. It will all say to historians, you are not able to talk about anything which might lead to some people being hurt. We will not look to the intention and the context in which the book or the opinion is written, but we will only say some people take offense of it, so you are not allowed to write it, and we don't think that that has been justified by their side of the house. Firstly, because they have failed to establish a harm, a real harm. And secondly, because their policy undermines us to draw a good conclusion from what happened from atrocities that happened in the past, and it undermines public discourse. Okay. Yuri said very boldly, it will bring problems into society. Well, we don't see how, if a Western historian, for instance, talked about the atrocities in Sudan, that will lead to their problems that are happening, problems which you might compare to inciting violence. But then they said, well, historians who in that post-war society talk very good about certain convicted dictators, these people should be convicted because they incite to violence, and because that would lead to tension there. Well, first we say, how is a trial going to lessen the attention which these historians will get? Isn't the trial always centralized about the opinions of that person? And wouldn't that minority feel undermined and suppressed by the majority who is convicting them because only they have won? Because that's what happens in post-war society. The winners take the losers to be convicted. Yes.
Basically, your extension says Truman should have been convicted too. Fine, that doesn't mean that glorifying convicted war criminals is good. If we say whoever has been convicted should not be glorified.
No. What we are saying that if you allow people to say everything which might lead to a psychological harm must lead to it being forbidden, then that would minimize the freedom of speech, and that would undermine the historians in their role. Okay, they somehow assume that if 10% thinks a certain way, that the other 90% will lead to that. They have a great distrust in the public discourse. And what we say, why are you assuming that? In most Western liberal democracies, and in almost all democracies, we assume that you can convince people and that you can reason with people. Why do you think that a certain minority, by being oppressed, or by voting, by telling what they think, will...
If that were true, there would be no prejudice, no racism at all.
No. Prejudice and racism are a part of public discourse, and they disappear once you can have a sensible debate about them. They will not automatically lead to violence. That's what you are asserting, and that's what we are saying that will not happen. Okay. What their policy does is saying, okay, these people are bad. They are not a part of humanity. They say only evil people and not normal people can do these kind of wrong things. And we are and on our side of the house, we say that if you do that, people will not draw conclusions. They will not see that everybody is able to do wrong things given a certain position and given a certain time. Saying that Hitler sometimes was nice to his dog and sometimes was a nice person to some people does not mean that you are saying his acts were good or what he did was good. But it just says that he's like other people. Like other people, he had some bad. He also did some good things, but he had also bad things which we condemn in our modern society. So we don't think that your logic flows. Then Rob pointed out that in post-conflict societies, we usually can see that the winner is the person who is the side which convicts other people. We say you are going to be, and especially in post-conflict society, need a public discourse, a certain evaluation about what happened in that society. We think that having that discussion about what happened and not having a one-sided discussion, when one side says the other side is bad and you shouldn't talk about your leaders, but we are going to say that our leaders are good, we don't think that that will enhance the political discourse in a post-conflict society. We think that it's probable that will lead to a society in which there are more tensions, in which the attention is only about the trials that happen, and in which leaders are convicted, and in which people are being told, you can't talk about your past, you don't talk about your former political leaders, you can't talk about your former leaders in a good sense, you can't say that some things were good about your policy. You only tell them, we are going to have a one-sided debate in which our side dominates, and in which our side is the good side, and in which the other side is the bad side. That's what happens, and that's what actually leads to tensions. Not people expressing their view on what was good in their society and what was good about their leaders. So we think that they have made a lot of assumptions, and they have failed to establish a certain harm. They have failed to tell us why this would lead to a good policy, and I beg you to oppose.
Speakers were very interesting and thought-provoking debate, and we should again show their appreciation for their contribution.